All right, it's 6:30. Hey guys, I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. I'm not going to talk a whole heck of a lot about anything. I'm just going to let Glenn go ahead and cover everything. He's got a whole lifetime history of muskie fishing to talk about. I'm going to let him have it.
Hey folks, it sure is good to be back with the club tonight. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the history of muskie fishing as far as it relates mainly to Lake James, Roadhouse, and as much as I can remember down that way. Where I'm going to show you some of the lures that I caught fish on during the years. And I kept a record of all the fish that I've caught. I started here in the back of a scrapbook and listed them out, each one by one. When I got the back filled up, went to the front of the book and started, filled out that many. I personally caught 125 muskies. 41 of them were caught on blade boats. "14 times I caught 2 muskies in one day, and one time caught 4 muskies in one day. That's the most I ever caught in one day. Back in the mid-'80s, early 80s to the mid-'80s, there was a flood in Marion, and it flooded the Marion fish hatchery, and the fish hatchery was raising northern pike and muskies, pure muskies, to cross for tiger muskies to stock. Well, when the flood came, it washed the fish, brood fish, out of the hatchery into the Catawba River, and that's how the stocking of Lake James took place. About 1988, I caught my first muskie by accident out of Lake James. I was bass fishing, and this is a Bagley Tennessee shad, Killer B2. And that's what I caught my first muskie on. It straightened out most of the hooks, but there was one point that helped, and we got in the boat. And that started my fishing career from then on. About 91, Russell Burleson, who was a land management with the wildlife department, wanted to fish Lake Adger. He was my next door neighbor. So we went over to Lake Adger one summer, and every Saturday we'd go over and we'd start on the upper end of the lake, and we would troll to the dam and back, load up and go home. Fished probably 12 or 14 times that summer, didn't catch fish. And that was enough for him for that year. He didn't go back next year. The next year, I wasn't pleased at all with my bass fishing, and that's what I really did most of the time early on. And I figured if I wasn't going to catch many fish, I was at least going to fish for big fish and not catch them. So I made up my mind to go to Lake Adger, because I knew Lake Adger had some big bass in it. It had muskies too. I was interested in catching some muskies. And with my bass fishing background, I fished a lot of bass baits. I was mainly bass fishing, but I was fishing where the muskies were. And this is the size baits it was using. These are Bill Norman DD, deep little ends, not DD22s, deep little ends. And that's a Bagley Killer B2 in dark crawfish on orange. And that is a real killer bait. Bad thing about it, it's a balsa bait, and it's good for one fish. I've got 2 of them at home somewhere that's chewed completely up. I couldn't find them. Don't know where I put them. But that's how I got started. The crowd I run with down in McDowell County, it's all bass fishing. I didn't know anybody down there that had caught any muskies. And I can remember thinking when I'd caught 3 or 4, I wonder if I'd ever get up to where I caught 10. To me, 10 was a big number of muskies to catch, and that's what I had my goal set on to start with. The second best thing that ever happened to Lake Adger was in '89 when Hurricane Hugo came through, and it just loaded up Lake Adger with timber. And it was so much timber that I couldn't fish these little baits around it. Everything just get hung up. You couldn't get in close enough to do any good. So I found some spinner baits, some big spinner baits, and 2 of them I found was Stan Sloan's aggravator. It had on the shaft of the blade right here, it had a rattle built onto it. As that thing come through the water, flipping them blades around, that rattle would go off, and boy, the fish loved it. Caught a lot of bass on it. I caught muskie on it too. Another one that was real good after that was a Stanley Vibra shaft. And the Stanley Vibra shaft, the wire tapered on it. It was big up here, and down here at the end, it was a whole lot thinner. It just tapered all the way down. And the blades were tapered. It was willow leaf blades, and they're tapered this way, but these were tapered this way. They were thicker up, I forget which end was thicker, but one end of them was thicker than the other. And that created a unique vibration, and fish loved that. Caught several muskies on it, and then they just quit hitting it. And when they quit hitting it, I mean, they turned off. You couldn't buy one in the lake nowhere on it. And I switched over to a small Rick's spinner bait, 1/4 ounce, but it had the loop tie on the end of it instead of the R-bend, so I could keep it on my swivel good. And the muskies and bass absolutely loved it. It's got Lumaflex skirt on it, and that's the most lively skirt that I know of. They just won't last if you lay them out in the sun. They all bleach out yellow looking. But that's an excellent spinnerbait. It's still good. I've caught more muskies on that 1/4 ounce spinnerbait than any other one plug I've got. One day over at Lake Adger, I heard a guy hollering pretty loud. It was down next to the dam, and he was 150 yards from me in a boat fishing. And I run up to him to see what the problem was, and there wasn't no problem. He just hooked a muskie, and he was extremely excited about it. His name was Mark Bergeson. He lived down in the eastern part of the state somewhere, worked for Dolly Madison and Cook Cake Company, and he was a computer genius with them. But every Saturday he'd come up and we'd muskie fish, and we got to be good friends. And he introduced me to Grim Reaper Lures, Muskie Shop, and Muskie Hunter magazine, and that opened up the door to be able to get some bigger muskie baits. And one of the Grim Reaper lures, back then Grim Reaper made hard baits, and that's a Grim Reaper minnow. I don't know, it weighs about 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces, chartreuse with black dots on it. It's a jerk bait. I just jerk straight down on it, and it'll jump out to the side, kick around a little bit. Very good bait. I've caught a bunch of fish on that thing. In fact, I've got about 6 of these that I've replaced with it over the years. They're no longer made. That's a bad thing too. I've got 2 wooden bodies that Lure Parts Online sale. I bought them just a couple of weeks ago. I'm gonna make me a couple of new ones of them. That's good bait. Long about, I don't know exactly the year, around 92 or 3, somewhere through there, the Asheville Citizen-Times on Sunday's paper would run an ad for the Muskie Club, Western North Carolina Muskie Club. That's where I found out about the Muskie Club. I called Don Funderud, talked to him, and he invited me over. I came over and sat in on a meeting or two. But my job was teaching at McDowell Technical Community College. Taught there for 29 years. And my teaching assignment was at night. So that kept me from attending meetings on a regular basis until I retired. Well, not quite that far back. Before that, a little bit, about 7 years before I retired, I went to a day job, and then I could attend muskie meetings at night. That was a big help to me, just being able to talk to other people at Muskie Fish that knowed something about it, that knowed where to go. That just opened up all kinds of doors for me. And some of the people that I met there was Don and Al Sims. Al Sims helped a lot. He's a real friendly guy, and he'd always going to Canada, and he knew all the good places up there to fish. And he had plenty of fish stories to keep me interested. And there was new guys coming into the club about that time, or just a little later. Josh Guthrie, Clint Irvin, Wayne Jackson, Keith Clark, Derek Argotti, all those guys come in long about the same time. And boy, they brought a load of fresh information to the club. It surprised me last month when Josh said he didn't come to the club till 92. It seems to me like I've known him all my life. But I'm sure he's not near that old though. My job at McDowell Tech allowed me at certain times to be able to take Fridays off from work. And I'd take Fridays off and go to Lake Adger, fish Friday, and stay over there and fish Friday and Saturday. I just spend the night in the truck. I'd sleep in the cab of the truck. Personally, I think a good night's sleep is overrated when you're talking about being able to muskie fish. My batteries would allow me to fish 2 days in a row without having to charge them, so I just fish. And I know when I was looking back, counting my muskies a while ago, I caught 14, there was 14 days I caught 2 in a row. But I also noticed that there was a lot of days where I caught muskies on back-to-back days. And I'm sure that was those Fridays and Saturdays when I was spending the night over there. A little later, there was a picture in the McDowell News of a guy that worked with the wildlife department of a muskie he had caught in the Catawba River above Lake James. Well, I had heard of muskies in Lake James, and I'd fished them. I'd caught the one previously, so I knew there were some in there. And I would occasionally go up the river, Catawba River, and fish it. And just by pure luck, I'd never see one, never catch one up there. But when he posted the picture in the paper of that one, I knew that there was more to it than what I was finding. I made up my mind that I was going to dedicate a bunch of time to fishing it. Well, the first week I started fishing it, I caught 140 inches right off the bat with on the shallow invader. on that big old shallow invader. That's about as good a plug as I ever threw. I found out about the shallow invader from Josh Guthrie. Excuse me. He had a rainbow trout color, and just a week or so before the Catawba River incident, he wore me out on Lake Adger with it, so I got me a shallow invader, ordered it from Muskie shop, and they were out of it, as they're out of a lot of stuff when you order from them. They had crappy color, so I bought the crappy color, and it has really turned into a good plug for me. Caught a lot of fish on that, caught big fish on it. For about 4 or 5 days after I caught that one, I was farther up the river, way above there, and I caught another. Caught one 42 inches on the same plug. I just kept fishing it with different lures, and they kept showing up. And I told the club about it. Several club members came down. I remember Josh catching 2 muskies on back-to-back casts one day up there. When the Catawba River's right, it's as good as anywhere. But when it ain't right, it's just like the Dead Sea. One fellow that I fished with quite a bit was Wayne Jackson. And Wayne introduced me to these 2 lures. That's a Smitty soft short tail. Kind of a unique way of working those. You just pull them up, just crank them along 4 or 5 feet and let them stop and float to the surface. And every muskie that I've caught on those have come while that thing stopped on the surface. Just give it a real fast crank, let it wiggle along, stop it, let it float up about a foot, doesn't run deep. Just let it float to the top, give it 15, 20 seconds, start it again. That's red horse and crappie. That first year that they were in the Catawba River, they stayed in there till September. If you're in a good location where there's muskies and you fish it with good equipment and are stealthy, you'll see muskies. They're inquisitive enough that they'll follow your lure out at times. Even when they're not biting, you should be able to see muskies occasionally. There'll be days you don't see any, but if you fish it constantly 3 or 4 times, you'll see muskies. Well, I was seeing them in there, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't seeing them, didn't see any. And I had one of the underwater cameras, and I went way up the Catawba River and come down it running that camera underwater, not fishing. And the shad and the suckers were thick in there, but all of them are moving downstream back toward the lake, and I didn't see a muskie. I am sure that the water temperature had something to do with driving those fish back into the lake. And I've noticed since then, some years they'll be in there all summer, but most years they are not. They go in there and spawn, or try to spawn, and then they leave. So it's just a hit or miss proposition. The North Fork River is real good. I'm going to tell you a little story about 2 muskies I caught one day on, don't remember what I caught them on. I believe I caught those on spinnerbait. That is a Grindstaff ceiling fan. It's a 1 ounce spinnerbait. Got big willow leaf blades on it. before Black Bear boat ramp was built, you had Burnett's Landing on the upper end, or you had North Fork boat landing. And now North Fork boat landing is a private campground. If you go into North Fork River to where the first landing, boat ramp is, they got 2 boat ramps. They're about 50 yards apart. But the first one you come to, if you're standing on the bank and look down that boat ramp, straight on across the river, there's a big rock wall over there. That whole water right in front of that wall is the best muskie hole on either one of those 2 rivers. I'd gone in there, there used to be a log that laid in there. I'd gone in there that morning and I caught a 47-inch muskie off of it on that spinnerbait, or spinnerbait like this. And I raised another muskie about 38 inches that I didn't catch. And I fished on around about lunchtime and discovered I'd left my lunch at home. So I loaded the boat on the trailer and went home. You know me, I ain't gonna miss a meal. So I went home and ate lunch, and it was a rainy, overcast day. It wasn't raining much, just drizzling a little long. And I thought to myself I'd go back and see if I could catch that 38-inch muskie, or what I thought was a 38-inch muskie. I went back and I caught the next muskie off that same tree, and that muskie measured 46 inches long. First one was 47 and the second was 46. That's the best day I ever had. They both come off spinnerbait like that. The biggest muskie I ever caught was on a solid white spinnerbait, and I had that, I use Mr. Twister 6-inch curly-tail grubs as a trailer. That trailer there. And I had that trailer on there. And there was a big hole it's a big bend of the river above the railroad trestle. And twice, 2 different days, I had hung a big muskie up there on the shallow invader and lost it both times. It was a big one. And it come a heavy rain up there, and the river was red clay muddy. And I can't think of the guy's name from Spruce Pine. Anyway, he called me that night. Jesse Buchanan called me, and I was talking to him, telling him I knew where a big one was, but the river was muddy. And he said to fix me up a white spinnerbait. And I just happened to have some big willow leaf spinnerbait blades. And I made one out like that way. And I went up there. I didn't fish anywhere till I got up to that log. And the first cast into that log, that muskie hit that thing. And boy, it was on. It was all I could do to handle it and net it by myself and get it in the boat. I didn't have any trouble getting it in the boat with the net. But I had trouble getting it, after I got it unhooked with no trouble, had trouble getting it back into the lake. That mishandling on my part there cost the life of that muskie. That's the last muskie that I've pulled into the boat. I keep them all in the net now. But that fish died on me. I took it to the wildlife department, and I gave it to them for research to see how old it was or whatever they wanted to check out on it. I really regretted not being able to get that fish back in the water quicker. I just couldn't pick it up. I just give out from fighting it, getting it in the boat, hurrying to get it unhooked and get a picture of it. And that was pure my fault.
What year was that?
don't know the exact year. It was probably around 2004, somewhere in there. I could be off on that. I'll look it up in a little bit, tell you. Gary Cargotti, one of the best fishermen that I know, we fished together several times and caught several fish with him, Roadhouse and Lake James. And he had told me about catching a fish in Roadhouse. And I went down a day or two later, and I caught one down there. Went back a few days later, caught another one. But those 2 weeks right there, I caught, I believe it was 7 muskies in that one stretch of water. Al Sims went with me a lot. We caught fish on spinner baits. Right here is the it's the Al Sims model with the gold blade and the silver blade on it. That's what he liked, and he caught a lot of fish on that. I didn't like that color combination too much until he showed me how good it was. We got to going up to Hungry Mother Lake, fishing it, caught several up there. That's about a 100-acre lake, a little bit over 100, and it's trolling motor only. Can't use gas motors on it. In November 2004, Josh Clint and myself, because of an article in Muskie Hunter magazine, we went over to Mountain Hill Lake to fish a hot hole over there. The name of the hot hole was Bull Run Steam Plant. And we didn't know where the hot hole was. Didn't know anything about it. But we were able to find Bull Run Creek on the map. So we went to Bull Run Creek and we caught a fish out of it, raised some out of it. And another fisherman just happened to come by and we asked him about it. And he said, well, you're about a mile from it. So we run down out of Bull Run, up the lake, and the next holler up is Steam Plant, which no longer produces hot water, I understand. But that was a real experience. That first day over there, even after being late getting there to it, we raised 20 muskies that day. Seemed like we caught 6, either 4 or 6. And the next time we went back, we raised 29. I'm sure we were raising some of the same fish more than once. It was a little confined, maybe 2 or 3 acre area. Had a lot of swift current in it. You just troll up one side and then float down the other. And you just did it over and over. You could go on down a quarter of a mile below there and still be in hot water. And it was just the right temperature for muskies to really be active in. And there'd be some stripers in there too that was fun to catch. I caught one in there one night that weighed 17 pounds. Carried on that blade.
Striper?
I ain't believe it, Shall Invader. Caught striper on it, yeah.
You remember what year that was?
I would say it was probably 2005.
Huh, wow.
Uh,
So, what was it like coming from places that you had been fishing to go somewhere like that and start moving that number of fish in a day? It must have been mind-blowing.
It was more than that. You couldn't sit in the boat. It was just, electricity was just thick. Yeah, it's just beyond anything that imaginable to be in that kind of fishing. I've been in one other situation similar to that on Lake of the Woods. There was a Monument Bay is a big area on Lake of the Woods. A lot of big muskies come out of there. And there was a big bay in there full of rice. It was rice grass. And rice grass is a little slender grass that grows up to the top of the water. It'll keep growing, but it lays out on top of the water. It don't have strength to stand up, and it'll just create a mat. It gets thick. But anyway, that's what we were fishing. And you couldn't fish anything much because of the grass, but because of Al Sins and his knowledge of fishing up there. Johnson Silver, hello, everybody's seen these things. But this curly tail right here, and this is the way you fish it, stuck straight up in the air like that. And that tail.
Some technical difficulties, my phone's full. We're going to keep going as long as we can. If this video doesn't keep going, I've got it recording on another video. You know what? I don't think I ever started that one. I didn't. Let's go with that one.
That's a funny little thing coming through the water. But boy, the fish up there loved it. I hung a fish up there twice, and we 2 different days, and we named that fish Bertha. Of all the muskies that I've ever hung, that was by far the biggest one. My nephew was with me, and we guessed that fish at 55 inches, and that's a guess. I didn't catch a fish. Come off both times. What surprised me the most about that fish is it thrashed and cut up. First time I seen it, I saw a wake coming behind the plug. Couldn't see the fish, but I could see that wake forming behind that. Huge fish. Anyway, that thing thrashed around, fought around the boat, but when it come loose, I had probably 6 foot of line out. When it come loose, it calmed down, swam in under the boat just as lazy as you ever see. I went out back, kept on going.
You stick your tail straight up like that, huh?
Yeah, right. Just as odd as that.
Huh.
And when you fish, it'll lay out back just like that. But that gives it a real kick.
Laurie Stroop said that you look great and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Laurie. Hal and Don and I went to Little Vermilion. We spent 2 weeks up there. That's probably the best muskie trip I was ever on. We caught 20 muskies that week. I don't know how many we saw. Caught 20 muskies that week. Caught them on a lot of different baits. I don't remember what we caught them on, I'll tell you the truth right off. My brother and I went up to back to Vermilion Lake, and Vermilion Lake is a big, long lake, but it's also got other lakes connected to it that you can go into. And this is a Lynn Thompson #2 spoon. Just a red and white spoon. I bought a bunch of spoons from Bass Pro Shop to take with me to fish. But there's a world of difference in identical spoons. This spoon has got a good wobble this way, but what makes this plug good is the wobble it's got this way. Caught a lot of muskies on that up there. I had caught one down here. The silver minnow, wherever I threw it. I've not caught a fish down here on it, only in Canada. If you get around grass is hard to fish. A spinnerbait or a silver minnow is about the only thing you can do unless you've got clear water. You can fish at top water over top of it. But grass is a pure delight to fish. I caught several muskies in top water plugs. I was in the back of Little Jackson one time, and I saw a big black spot in the water. I couldn't tell what it was. So I run the trolling motor over to it, and it was a huge school of shad about that long. And they were just circling around, probably a 6-foot circle. And they were just circling, just black as it could be. And every once in a while, a muskie would blow up in it. And I threw that black and chrome spook and caught that fish out of them shad on that spook. Of all my topwater lures, that's my favorite one. That's a super spook in clown color. It's a saltwater model. It's a hard color to find, but you can order them and get them. The bad thing about these is the chrome won't stay on. That's a small price to pay. The first year in Canada, that was the hot lure. It's the orange color stalker. That was a real good lure up there. The only double 10 that I've caught muskies on is this slowy. It's got a long name, and I can't remember all of it, but it's some double tail, tandem, something other slowy. You can buy the tails, and I build my own because I don't particularly like that blade. I like a round blade better. What you do, they got a little wire shaft in them. What I do is take and bore a 1/4-inch hole in it and put that flexible guys line cable through it, put a piece of it in there, then we run the wire down through it and it'll stay on there. If you don't do that, all this weight of the blades and the beads up here pushes that, and they'll push that body right down, and it'll just crump it all up down there. It makes a mess out of it. Caught several muskies on DC 8s, number 8 blades. I've got a brown one, a white one, and a fire tiger color, and couldn't find any of them. I don't know where I put them at, but they're all good. When I saw that picture in the paper of the wildlife guy catching the muskie out of the Catawba River, I went down to Burnett's Landing and talked to Gary Nanny down there, asking him about it. He knows everything about that area. And he asked me if I'd heard about Larry Brown and his boat. They were, I think, staying at that campground and they'd seen a muskie in the North Fork River, and I got on the internet and found out that a believer was a good muskie bait, and they bought one. Now, I don't know if they bought this one. I don't know what they had, but it was a believer, and they trolled right in front of that campground, caught 5 muskies there trolling that shallow water in front of the campground. When Gary told me that, I knew I was going to spend some time in there fishing for them. And I did catch one muskie on this particular bait. My number one bait when I'm trolling is I'm going to have this 7.5-inch ground maul. That's a rainbow trout color. That's my favorite one for trolling. When I troll 3 rods. I troll 2 out the side and 1 back out the middle. And the one out the middle, I always troll a shallow invader. And I run it that deep in the water, right in the prop wash. I set my rod at an angle so that the tip of the rod is right over the motor, so that that plug is right in the prop wash. And the prop wash really makes this thing walk like that. Especially when you make a turn and turn it, it'll push that thing over like that. I've never caught a fish on it, but I was told by Gary Nanny's brother that saw it, that one come up, blowed up on it there in the North Fork River. I didn't know a thing about it until they told me about it. There's a pulsator that's been repainted. That's I believe, a 9-inch. That's a good plug. Caught several on it. That's a pretty good handful to throw for me for a day all day. Doesn't have a whole lot of action to it, but boy, the fish like them.
I believe it's called a twitch darter these days. Don't look for pulsator.
You are correct. Twitch darter. That's about what I know about the history of Roadhouse and Lake James. I know that the fish got into Roadhouse from out of the Catawba River, and not from Lake James, but from the creek from the Table Rock Hatchery. When you cross Catawba River above Roadhouse, if you look upstream, you'll see a creek coming in on the right side. That's the creek that comes out of the fish hatchery.
It's about 14 miles from the hatchery.
Yep.
That's me looking with Google Earth and trying to figure out how far it is down through there. And I've thought about fishing that creek before.
You take little muskies that long, try to keep them hemmed up. It's just like getting a 2-year-old to stay put. They're going to lose some of them, and that's where they end up at. Right here, recently, that's a Gary Yamamoto bait. It's got a green back and a clear sides. They don't make it anymore, naturally, but I bought about a dozen of them off of eBay because that is such a good bass bait. The only place I can catch a fish on it is in the Catawba River. Every plug that I've had here tonight, I've caught muskies on, including that little fella. I've raised 2 or 3 others on it. Yeah, I don't know what they see in it, but boy, they like it. Here's a little underrated plug. It's a Joe Booker I'll have to read shallow raider. It's the little size, and boy, they got the action. They're a lively plug.
You know you're gonna have these boys spending about $1,000 to buy all these lures.
Well, join me. My daughter bought me a new tackle box for Christmas, the Magnum.
That's a good girl.
She is, that's she is. That's about what I got.
You want to talk about your pictures?
Yeah, I sure do. This is from the good 2-week spell at Roadhouse. These 2 were caught on a Friday, and these 2 were the next day on a Saturday. This fish is 50 inches long.
That's Wayne Jackson there.
Yeah. That's Wayne Jackson, and that's Al Sins. These fish were all caught the same day on Mountain Hill Lake. You see who's who. This is Wayne Jackson. This is Keith Clark. And the other two are me. This fish here is 50 inches long. That's what the hot hole was like when it was right.
So for those of you watching that don't know, that electric plant is being considered outdated. For the last couple of years, has only been used when the weather's really cold and people are using excessive amounts of electricity to heat their homes. And it sounds like now that they have completely shut it down. I haven't heard of it running. It may run, but I kind of think its days are at least numbered if they're not already over.
I thought they had changed from heating from coal to another fuel.
It may be something like that, but that, you know, it was a coal-fired plant. That's why it was used for cooling down the water. That doesn't mean that you can't still find fish in that area. So don't call it dead. It's just it's never going to be 70+ degree water in the middle of January and February again.
Yeah, that's the only time I'd fish and go over there in the January, December and January.
Right. I tried to hit it, and every time I went, it was cold, cold, cold.
Yep.
But so do you remember what year you became president of the club? About-ish?
Maybe around 2012.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. I think I was president for about 3 years. I
Well,
enjoyed it.
you were president when I started.
When did you start?
It was 6 years ago now. Around 6+ years ago. Me and Matt Christie had started fishing, and we met what's his name? Ben Wiggins' good buddy Denver. we met his good buddy Denver over here at my house. He had said that this guy Denver catches a lot of muskies, and I think this was right after the year that Denver had caught that great big fish on the French Broad. Probably his PR on the French Broad, huge fish. I mean, just great big old. And we're seeing these pictures of these fish, and just going, man.
Yeah.
And Matt had a lot of success before I really got started on the Collins River, and I think he had caught some French Broad fish. And I netted my first muskie, the first one I ever got to see in the net. I mean, I had seen muskies on the French Broad eating my smallmouth. You know, once at Mills River, I caught a smallmouth and a muskie, eat it, and took it to a log jam on 6-pound test. And hell, I was going to go in after it, and I got in the water about chest deep, and I started thinking about, man, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I said, I think I'm going to break this off, and I kind of dabbled in it, but I never got serious. But Matt Christie really got me interested and pushed me to it. And then I came, and then you were president of the club. Yeah, we're still running. And I appreciate, and I know a lot of other people appreciate all the help that you can get from going to a muskie club.
That's truth. That and fishing with other fishermen.
It does. I mean, so for Matt, I started fishing with Neil, and Neil was a big help to me. Neil really liked throwing glide baits at the time and pink lures, and I used to make fun of the pink lures, but boy, that day I went out with him and he threw that one certain pink bait, boy, he was moving them left and right. And I mean, it looked like a raw hot dog coming through the water, but man, I don't care. The fish liked it. I know Denver's told me about when he first started coming to the club. He's like, there's probably a lot of different kind of crowds meeting up then.
Yes, they were.
These boys come in pounding beers, and I'm like, man, these guys are going to tell us about muskie fishing, and all we got to do is pay $20. I'm in. Sign me up. And, you know, it was pretty much the same thing when I come in. I get to sit here and meet all these people and talk about muskies, and it's been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate your involvement and helping me out, and I kind of follow your lead on. You've got to help.
You've certainly done a good job of building the club up. You have really brought a lot of new members in.
I think a lot of it's people that organically find muskie fishing. I don't actively go out and hunt people. I don't advertise. But if you're going to come to muskie fishing, if there's one thing that I really agree with what the club does, is help people to do it the right way. Clint wants to know, who's Wayne Jackson? Mickey's laughing about the raw hot dog. Denver said, glad you're doing well. I think, I don't know if I can scroll back through this or not. Peter said, bravo, Glenn. Thanks. Great job. It says Brittany, but I'm sure it's Clint asking about homemade baits. That was one thing I was wanting to put on the menu is I want to get together with you or have you put together a list from the lure company, because the Glenn Grindstaff Sealing Fan is a well-known bait in the club, and it's had a lot of success. And I want to put together for the club, for everybody, one day when we can all meet again. I want us to order a bunch of parts for these things. We can have a fundraiser, order a bunch of parts, and Glenn can run us through, and we can all sit here and make a handful of these things.
If you're interested in making some of these yourself, you buy the wire shaft with the head already on it. You buy the skirt, and the skirts come with a rubber collar on them. I don't like a rubber collar because they don't last, but they'll work. I wrap mine with red thread. I like that little bit of red flash on there. You can buy the spinner bait, swivels, blades, spacers, beads, clevises, all of it from Bass Lure Parts Online. One word, Lure Parts Online. And if you'll look, you can open up their catalog on their website and page through it. And one page is the bottom of one page, a big bar all the way across. It lists different size heads and the size components it takes to build that spinnerbait. It ain't nothing special. It's just parts straight out of the catalog.
There's been times that I come around certain bends of certain rivers, or even out on Milton Hill where you just got this great big old tree, or even on Azure. Now, I haven't done much of anything I worth to talk about on Azure, but on other lakes, when it's super, super woody, you can take those things and you can throw them and work them through anything, and they're really, really good baits. I've only caught a couple fish on spinner baits, but they definitely have a time and place.
There is a buzz bait, and I caught my biggest bass ever on a buzz bait like that. Because of catching that one bass on that buzz bait, I started fishing it more, and 3 days later, I caught a muskie on a buzz bait. It's the only muskie I ever caught on a buzz bait. I've caught several on top water lures, but only one on a buzz bait. If you want to catch a muskie on a top water lure, the one thing you got to do is throw a top water lure. You won't catch it if you don't.
It's true. Has anybody got any more questions for Glenn? I'll give you guys a couple minutes to think about that. It's been a really strange year, and all these meetings have been weird. Zoom meetings and live Facebook and this, that, and the other. I've tried to mix it up a whole lot so that we still have some public involvement. Reach out to the new folks that are on the page and whatnot. I'm always open to suggestions, because sometimes I feel like I'm running out of ideas for new meetings, but y'all let me know.
There's another shallow invader that I've caught muskies on. I've got shallow invaders in about every color, but they nearly always become crappie color at some point.
Wear them out and put black dots on.
Yeah, when they get wore out, they become this color.
Do you remember what the story was with the eyelashes?
Yeah,
I don't remember if I think I gave my last one to Barrett. I did.
When you paint these eyes, usually I've got a little thing that I just dip it in paint and just dog it on there. But I painted one with an airbrush, and I purposefully overshot it. And when you put too much paint on, it starts running off, and it looks like eyelashes on them.
God, how long's that been?
That's been a while.
It's
I don't
been
even remember what.
Probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I mean, I always made fishing lures, but I didn't build them to what I do now. Once I seen what Denver was doing, I was like, man, I want to do that. That's cool. But I built a handful of crappie glide baits that we called, you got the shallow invader, you got this, so you always got, these 2-word names for baits, so I called it the Crappie Glenn.
Yeah.
Because Glenn always likes a crappie color. And for some reason, I remember him doing a post and it having the eyelashes on it. And I put eyelashes on that whole series of baits. And I know you've got one. I think I had one. It's not up there now. I think I give it to Barrett. Barrett, it's a collector's item, man. But yeah, that's just one of the humorous stories that you find when you start going to meetings all the time.
There's a few people I'd like to thank for different things over the years. I'd like to thank Josh for being able to find so many good plugs to share with me. That's the way you get better and evolve, is by changing, and having a good plug to go with goes a long way. I wish that I could think like a fish, like Wayne Jackson does. He overthinks it to the 9th degree, but it works for him. I wish I could fish a bulldog like Aaron Parker does. He just knows how to do it. I wish I could fish a glide bait like Tim does. I've never caught a fish on a glide bait other than I don't even see it.
Oh, you ain't had a glide bait out there.
I got one with the rubber tail somewhere. I didn't bring it. That I caught on. All that stuff helps people out. And I learned about the effects of moon phase from Wayne Jackson. And a lot of those days when I was catching 2 a day or catching them back to back, it's not just time fishing. It's time fishing when it's good. There's windows, and at times, some days, it's just a 1-hour window. And some days, it's 2 days in a row that there'll be little windows. So if you fish enough, you'll hit some of those. And I wish I was as lucky as Clint was. Hard work goes a long way to making luck, though.
Right. So you remember Mickey Grant? He asked Glenn out of Adger James and Adger James and Roadhiss, which one is your favorite lake and why?
Well, Lake James, because it's closest, 5 minutes from me. But I honestly believe that Roadhiss has got more muskies in it than James does.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you think that?
I've just seen more.
Really?
Yep. It's bigger water too.
It's what?
Bigger water.
Huh. Nate, this video will be saved as long as nothing goes wrong with my phone. Sergeant Jenkins, check this out. His wife Billy. Hey guys. Mike asked, what brand skirt do you use in the ceiling fan again? Mike, I'll get we'll put together a list, an order form list, and I'll work with Glenn on that, and we'll do a screenshot of it and post that, because I'm going to do a secondary post tomorrow about this video and kind of take some pictures of stuff that we didn't get to really see real well.
It is a musky spinnerbait. Try to get a little better shot of it. It's a musky spinnerbait. It's not a bass size. It's longer. And this one has been trimmed. The longer you leave them, the less they flow. I mean, they flow, but they don't flare out like that. They stay bunched up together, and they look longer. They'll be about that long if you don't trim them. And the shorter you cut them, the more they'll flare out. So just whichever you want. I like a pretty long one, and it takes a 6-inch skirt, 6-inch rub to get out of that skirt good. I've tried 5 inches, and 5 inches just doesn't really show up like it should. But that's from Lower Parts Online. It's a musky skirt. It's a musky head. It's got that wrap on it. They offer 2 heads. These are about $2 a piece. Blades are about $1 a piece. You can have about $6 or so in a spinnerbait. I use Mr. Twister 6-inch curly tail grubs for this. Right here's one thing that I wanted to show you. If you want a good deal in braided line, look up Hercules website. They're on eBay, and that's where I bought this one. This is 70-pound test is what I bought. But they got all different sizes. They got a whole lot more colors and sizes than anywhere I've ever seen. They got it up to 300-pound test if you need it. But this particular one in 70 pound is 500 meters. And 500 meters is 549 yards. And it's $21. It's company out of California.
Here's a good question, Glenn. How do you tune a spinnerbait when it's running sideways in the water? Or do you just slow down your retreat?
No, these are real way to tell. If that thing's coming through the water and it'll be turned over on one side or the other. I'm going to exaggerate it so you can see it here. If it's turned over that way, this arm needs to be bent down. Whichever way that arm's leaning, you bend it down and that pushes it back up.
Huh. That's a great question, Mickey. There's certain spinnerbaits I don't throw anymore because they swim crooked.
That's it.
All I have to do is bend them a little bit.
And if that don't do it, bend it the other way.
Has anybody else got any more questions? We'll go wrap it up. Go cook a hamburger.
I spent one night this last week taking a file and going through my whole tackle box, sharpening blades. And to me, a file is by far the fastest way to sharpen them. You just touch them a little. It don't take much. That's a good thing to do on a cold winter night. All
right, guys. Well, I look forward to the day when we can have some real meetings again, but I definitely don't see that happening in the next probably 3 to 4 months. Mickey wants to know when you're going to start throwing a fly rod.
That's a good question. I'll ponder that for a while. Speaking of flies, I'd love to have about a 3/4 ounce jig that's got the variated skirt like a fly. I'd love to have one. I honestly believe that a fly will trigger more strikes than any of these plugs here just because of how good they look in the water.
Derek, we make a lot of jokes about flies, but
yes, I do.
The fly moves even when it's not moving. I mean, it's got a certain life to it that I get aggravated throwing a fly rod myself. But
tell you what, another thing I'm going to try this year is from bass fishing. The hot thing in bass fishing for the last few years has been a drop shot. And I'm going to rig me up a musky size drop shot to where I can fish a bottom constantly without getting hung up and be in that good strike zone without relying on them, pulling them up from the bottom.
Right.
I believe that extra slow speed of a drop shot.
I believe it'd work on the French Broad if you ever get the river slow down.
You know, I'm always talking about the Catawba River and the North Fork and the Johns River. But I'm fishing lake water. It's always lake backed up to wherever I'm fishing. I fished the French Broad a few times, and I know the difference in fishing a true river and fishing a river that's backed up with a lake up in it.
Right now, your eddies are about this far away from the bank. And by the time you hit that bait, you got pop, and then you're in the current.
Yeah. I've never caught a muskie.
I'll do it, Mickey. Mickey's going to make you I think pretty much what you want is what they call a game changer. The segmented fly body with the jig head.
Yep.
Mickey's going to make
That's it. Ain't no price, fella.
Mickey's one of the most talented fly tires in the whole community. So I'm sure I appreciate you doing that, Mickey.
Yeah, I do too. I really do.
Game changer on a get jig head. Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't have talked about that out loud.
Well, you know, our philosophy is to help people.
Right.
And I was thinking about helping me at the time, though.
All right.
Thank you, folks.
Any more questions?
I posted my email address on the club website. If you got any questions, just email me. I'll answer them if I can. I don't keep secrets from people.
It's a tough job, man.
Yeah, I can't remember which lies I told.
It's all lies. You know, we used to call this basement the Liars Club because there was a bunch of fishermen in here telling lies. There's old Barrett. Barrett, we were talking about you, man. You got a fishing lure. It might be a collector's item. I'll talk to you about it later. All right, guys. We're going to shut her down. Hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties with the video saving because this one's going to be saved. We appreciate everybody tuning in and watching, and we appreciate Glenn's history with the club and how much effort and work and sharing of information that he's put into in the past to help people in this tough game of muskie fishing. All right,
folks.
You got lots of people saying thanks. You can go back tomorrow and you can watch this thing and it'll pop up all the messages and say it. All right. Guys, appreciate everybody. Later. See if I can figure out how to stop this thing.